proportional response. Book 1, Chapter 15, Part 2, Her Majesty's Policies. Hannibal felt his eyes close and open in a slow blink. I had no idea until recently. I mean, it has seemed like there has been something going on back home. A lot of old guard types resigning, retiring, or even being forced out in disgrace or arrested. Such things happen for sure, and I hadn't thought about it much until very recently when His Grace Lanthew, remember him, announced his retirement under clouds of scandal. I mentioned something to Her Grace Gorner about how it seemed the rate of such things had slowed, and she gave me a very strange look. They explained to me that these sorts of things used to only happen every few years, not a few times a year like. They have since a little before I started in the diplomatic corps. Then she explained to me why it has been so frequent for so long. His aunt interjected as she continued to work on Henry's shoulders. Oh yes, she has been slowly finding ways to move anyone who supports the policy or the exoten out of the government, mostly by eroding their support and then making her own displeasure at their continued existence in her service known. The majority of them have gone quietly. A few even realized what criteria she was attacking based on and excused themselves or changed their tune. Hannibal, trying to distract himself from lying to Henry and telling his brother that it had been Golna, rather than the princess, who had informed him about the purge when he'd grown morose over the reports from the front lines. The first news stories about it had sent the two of them scrambling to check their official email addresses. The fact that the first email they'd seen had been from Duchess Euro and had contained an email bomb which tanked their connections hadn't deterred them from looking as much as they could find and trying to puzzle out fact from fiction. That, of course, engendered a phone call from Her Grace, who ordered them, in no uncertain terms, that they were going to leave it alone and get back to enjoying themselves. His fiancée had obeyed the order with a will, and with great success. He'd had a harder time with it at first, but she'd been very convincing. His eyebrows drew down of their own accord, and he looked sharply at Henry and Eldia. Wait, how is it that you two know so much about that purge? I didn't find out about it in time to look into it before my vacation. I have been researching it since I got back yesterday and have barely started to put it all together. Henry gave him a wry smile, eyes still closed, before speaking. Caslor, remember that he was not only alive when Kenfistration was going on, but was there on Earth, or at least in the solar system, was feeling particularly, let's say, negative about the Venter role in our history after he watched everything play out. I think he realized that the sort of scene he witnessed was exactly what Kenfistration was supposed to bring about, and the reality of it caught him off guard. Henry harumphed. That is the problem with modern societies. Leaders live in their towers, reading reports, and insulated from the realities of the orders they give. A dark shadow seemed to fall over his countenance, despite his relaxed posture. Well, sometimes the leaders are just the types of bad people who like to watch death, destruction, and the rape of children. Eldia dug a thumb into a muscle, and Henry winced. It is true, though. They were. He stopped himself as she threatened to dig into him again. No, you are right. All of us know it, and there is no reason to go back over it. Henry trailed off, and they sat there for a while. Finally, Henry grabbed one of Eldia's hands, kissed it, and sat up in his chair. Hannibal stood and moved from the desk to sit in a chair of his own. They talked for a while about life, and Hannibal let himself fall into the pleasure of a simple conversation. He mentioned that he and Vashna had taken a vacation to celebrate their engagement, and the conversation turned earnest, with Henry and his aunt pumping him hungrily for every scrap of information that he'd give them. By the time that conversation wound down, he felt almost like he'd been through an interrogation and might have protested if not for the circumstances. As it stood, though, he could see a touch of light in his brother's eye, and his aunt seemed to sit a little straighter. He decided it had been worth it. Henry passed out yet another round of drinks and gave a deep sigh. Thank you, my brother. I would apologize for giving you a grilling like that, but I think you enjoyed most of it. I think it helped us to hear that you got to experience some real joy. You and that pretty girl of yours are going to have to take us to that snow skiing place you visited, though. That restaurant at the top sounds amazing. Henry gave him a broad smile, then sighed heavily. shot back the rest of his drink and held it out for Eldia to pour him another while he continued. Unfortunately, there is a little business we need to get through though. First, something that I need you and Her Majesty to know about that ship. We are going after it. We sent the Dauntless and her carrier group after it. The ship was designed to... well, let's just say that we believe the odds of finding her are 50-50 at best. If the Dauntless finds her, then forcing her to stop won't be an issue, massively oversized target that she is, but... Henry spread his hands in a helpless gesture. It was not designed to be found. No, scratch that. It is too big and lumbering in sublight to be hard to find if, say, it blundered into an inhabited system. More accurate would be to say that it was designed to be hard to follow. A singularity large enough to move something that size should leave traceable spatial disturbances that last for days. The Phoenix's trail was already growing cold by the time the Dauntless left the system after her, the day after she ran. Henry ran a hand through his hair and looked away. We wanted to give chase sooner, and it was not an easy decision, but the people on that ship will live, albeit in terrible conditions if the ship isn't caught. The thousands of people trapped in those civilian ships that the Dauntless's group saved would not have. In the end, it wasn't a moral dilemma, it was a math problem, and the captives on the Phoenix were on the wrong side of it. Annabelle shook his head, nodded, and reached out to have his glass topped off. He let a sip of the liquid fire burn down his throat before he answered. I don't envy you the decision, brother mine. You are right though. Life is, well, life. I watched the videos, all of them. You acted rightly. Henry gave him a wry smile and raised his glass. Sometimes the heart refuses to believe what the mind knows. At any rate, we hope to catch the ship. The Dauntless has been told to give chase for up to 12 weeks, then call off the search and come home. Annabelle felt his eyebrows furrow together. 12 weeks? I guess a ship that size could go on far longer than that without stopping. By the hells, it could actually have a fuel converter in there. Actually, it would almost have to. Henry leaned forward a bit and topped off his glass, and he let his mind rest. Henry is telling me a lot more than he is saying, giving me the clues to Phoenix so that we can know enough without being told. His eyes widened as the possibilities swept through his mind. Henry leaned back, gave him a tight-lipped, lopsided smile, and winked. Annabelle returned the smile in kind, raised his glass, and took a drink. They all took a moment to sip their drinks and allow for a companionable silence. After a few minutes, Henry spoke again with a small wave of his hand. Anyway, there is another little piece of business we need to discuss. That the intelligence asset among the Zoltan hackers has paid off already. It appears that one of the things that damned Fat Cat managed to get a hold of was the reports from S-Rook, proving they stole the grain well after the so-called war between us and the Zoltans ended, along with some of our plans for what to do about it. They got a few scraps of information about the fungus and know that their fields are probably infected, but not how or why. That might be a bit of an issue, but it seems they also got a lot of the information about how to combat it too. Fortunately, what they didn't get was the information needed to synthesize the fungicide, and they seem to be having a heck of a time trying to figure out how to make it. Henry got a dark grin for a moment, since the compound is actually the waste product of a particular bacteria, and that is a piece of information they don't have, and the bacteria needs a high-gravity environment to survive. I doubt that they will crack it anytime soon. The dark look disappeared, and Henry ran a hand through his hair before he continued. They believe, however, that they will have the ability to synthesize it very soon. Our review of the situation makes us believe they are woefully incapable of the task. This seems to be one of those cases of the underlings telling the elites what they want to hear, probably in order to try and keep their heads on their shoulders while looking for an escape. In any case, the Zoltans have decided to say nothing to anyone else about the issues caused by the grain, and to stonewall questions about it. This presents us both with opportunity and issue. The issue, to start with the bad news, is that the fungus in question has already been found on dozens of League worlds outside of Zoltan space, and that is just the ones we know about. To complicate that problem, there are at least 2 cases in the Sultan Republic and 1 outside of it where the thing has taken root on low-index worlds and is spreading beyond even our worst-case projections. If we wait until the Zoltan break down and come to us for help, There could be a number of worlds facing ecological disaster. Annabelle broke in. Something has to be done. I found out, just before you left, that a couple of vendor consortiums bought some of the tainted grain off of the exaltants. If that stuff is allowed to go unchecked. Henry held up a hand. It won't. You see, here is what we are going to do. Annabelle sat and listened as Henry started to explain the plan. The three of them then examined it from every angle they could consider, pulled at it, poked it, and made a few changes. It was a good plan to start with. Of course, it wasn't like Henry had built it by himself. Once they had the details hammered out, Henry poured them all the last of the bottle, got up, got another bottle, and prepared to pour more. The three of them spent the rest of the evening getting truly, companionably, and most undiplomatically drunk. Annabelle, at least, felt that his brother and aunt really needed it, and was surprised to find that he did too. When he finally staggered out of the office, he left behind the crystal with Her Majesty's message for Henry, explained that it would disintegrate after having played once, and that he shouldn't otherwise record it. Henry waved his assent, apparently not trusting himself to talk, and Annabelle left. He didn't want to go through listening to the recording again. It was a heartfelt expression of condolences and support for humanity in general, and Henry in particular, delivered secretly, because the plan couldn't allow such things to be expressed in public. It had brought tears to his eyes when he recorded it, and he certainly didn't need that again now. He recognized, barely, the nice soldier woman who took his arm to help him leave the embassy, but he felt grateful that she, very gently, took him all the way home, until she could hand him off to his own staff. He felt like he'd done a good job of making a bunch of undiplomatic complaints about humans and humanity on their walk. The soldier put on a brave, long-suffering face as they walked, one which he would have believed if he hadn't spent so much time reading Humans that he could catch the brief flashes of amusement in her eyes.